kind of spend some time speaking about user experience in general. So, who knows what exactly is user experience? Everybody talks about it, everybody speaks about users, interfaces, usability, user experience. I mean, we keep hearing this all the while, but do we really know what all this terminology really means? So let me just get started by trying to explain what user experience or user interfaces are in my own terms. This is my definition. Just briefly about myself, I actually grew up in the southern side of India, and I am an avid movie buff myself. So I grew up watching a lot of Malayalam, Tamil movies, and for me, Tamil Malayalam movies are the best way of entertainment, and I actually came up to TEDxPilani and started watching some other movies. So let me just try to do some engineering way of looking at what user interface and user experience is. So let me just get started with my exhibits. I have a few exhibits to show what it really means for me as user interface. That is a user interface for me, but then that's not good enough. Then I moved on to see what a user experience is. Then I went on to say what is an ultimate user experience is. Showing these three pictures, what I'm trying to say is user experience or user interface is such a unique concept that it varies from person to person and the perspective switches across every individual, because our perception to something that we call as a good user experience, good user interface is going to be orthogonal to somebody else here. So for instance, if my friend was doing this, you would put pictures of somebody else, and that is like a great user experience. So let me just try and ponder on this topic a little. So since the whole concept of user experience is really perspective oriented and really based on what you think it is very important to actually look at why do we need something called a user experience concept at all. So I represent a technology domain. I'm a programmer, I'm a computer engineer, so I typically work with a lot of interfaces or experiences in the internet sphere, in web applications. So many a time I get really baffled by people who say, oh, you know what, programming and engineering is all about writing really great code and you implement really great engineering problems, and user interface is just a byproduct. So several of my friends say, oh, what usability? There's something called a man in my command. You go type it, you know what it exactly works. So I ask a question back to those people. See, we as human beings, don't we make a lot of our choices based on user interface? This is a question that I ask myself, a question that I ask a lot of people who actually put this argument to me. So right from the small child, when he picks up a toffee, he goes by the color of the toffee. When he buys a car, or when you go buy a new gadget, you actually look at how that gadget looks like. And even to much more interesting things in your life, user interface is a very key parameter. So I'll tell you a small little story of my friend. My friend's sister was, they were looking out for an alliance for my friend's sister. So this is just from my own experience with respect to user interface. So he gets an alliance of a guy who's a friend of his and walks up to his sister and says, hey, you know what, I found this really great alliance for you. This guy is a super duper engineer from a premier college, and he can actually draw a free body diagram blindfolded, and he can also do a mathematics of 3,600 into 2,500 without a calculator. And she asks, you have a picture? Then she looks at the picture and says, cool, I really wished he was like 2 inches taller and had a six-pack. So my point is, eventually you look at everything as the first step. I mean, user interface, although I'm not denying that having an engineering prowess or doing all those fancy things that he said is not important, but it's important that you look at what exactly that object that you're presenting towards. So hence, user interface or user experience is a very important aspect through our lives, not just in technology. Let us look at a different approach altogether. So I have an afterlife as a musician, so I like music a lot in terms of what music really exudes. So this is a small little thing that I was thinking. Let me just utter out a few lines to you guys, a set of Hindi lines. These lines go like this. Tu hi re, tere bina main kaise jiyo, aaja re, yu hi tadpana tu mujhko. Anybody who understands Hindi understood the meaning? And you also understand it's a rhyming poetry. But what really lacks in it is the soul and spirit of what that piece of lyric or what that piece of poetry tries to convey to you. And that is what is very important when you actually deliver that to your user, who's a listener, as a song. So if I would go and say, Tu hi re, tere bina main kaise jiyon, aaja re, यूं ही तड़पा तू मुझको. You see the difference? So you got the feedback. When I said those words, you guys did not respond. So when I actually sang a few lines, however good or bad it is, with a little bit of musical embellishments to it, you immediately respond to it. You actually feel connected to it, and thereby you feel nice to hear something like that. So these are a little small things that we kind of try to not look at or try not to really feel when we actually go to technology and start building applications. So whenever you build an application, all these things take a backseat in technology. When you build, you already write the logic. Many of us are engineers here. You write the program, you debug it, and finally when you get a chance to think, maybe I can put a user interface for it, otherwise I will always let the user figure this out. So what I come up with is that, to tell and make people empathize with the fact that your user, if you are a person building an application, your user deserves your empathy. User deserves that feeling of togetherness that he has with you in terms of using his application. So these are the 5 things that I think every single engineer or every single person who is doing product design, program design should keep in mind. I call these 5 demandments of rich internet applications. So I will summarize these as follows. The 5th one, I call it as, the whole idea of humanizing an interface. So what do I mean by humanizing an interface? Let's look at today's life. Many of the internet applications that we see today are more or less programmed to make you understand and learn a workflow and then use it. So let's take an example. So if you walk into, let's say, a cloth shop today, and you want to buy a shirt, you actually feel the shirt, ask the guy at the shop with respect to how much is it and what, and you have a point where you clearly know what you are really getting into. But what happens in today's internet applications is that you simply go to a catalog, click a few buttons, look at a few things. It does not really tell you as to why you should actually buy this object, because the interface isn't conducive. So what you need to really try and do in building applications is to kind of make the user believe that this is what I would have done if internet hadn't existed. So if there was no internet, there was no online transactions, I would have simply walked into a shop and kind of done something very simple like that. Since my projector slides back, I already touched upon humanize, which comes a little later. The next one, what I want to say is simplify. Whenever you're building an application, simplify it. Don't ask your user, don't ask your customer, don't want him to answer questions that he doesn't have to answer. Give him only what he requires and ask him only what you need from him. For example, don't ask a person to register just because you want his email address, because he's not going to do it anyway. So be very, very cautious and pragmatic with respect to what you give the user and what you take back from him. That will lead up to a lot of goodwill to your application. I will have a small, can't say enough about beautifying something. So once again, I can't repeat, in my entire life, I have not seen a single person who have not made his choice based on something beautiful. But I actually have seen one, and that happens to be my wife. When I made a proposal, she actually agreed to marry me. I don't think she really goes by user interfaces, but other than that, I have pretty much seen a lot of people actually look at what you have in stock and then go ahead and use it. So beautification is very important. If you have an existing application or a solution or product, do your thing to make it look beautiful. Do those tiny little tweaks, animations, transitions. They say movement has meaning. If something is really still, it actually looks like a picture and you don't really relate to it. But when you really have motions and transitions, it feels much better. You feel much more adapted to seeing an application like that. So beautify those small little engineering products that you do. That will take you a long way with respect to winning your users' confidence. I already touched upon this. The next one is personalize. So what do I mean by personalize? Don't do an application which is not relevant to a particular person who is using it. For example, I just was wondering, my mother wanted to buy a mobile phone online. I don't know what made her really think about buying a cell phone online, but this is really from my experience. But the application that she saw, it almost looked like, there were too many things in it, and she just said, this is all suited to you young kids who are like really used to doing elaborate, explicit stuff. But what I really showed her, I showed her another application which I'll share with you guys as I move forward, is to humanize and personalize this interface so that it is understandable by a person without really getting into the technical hullabaloo of things. You don't have to understand how stuff works behind. You don't have to know any of that. You just have to use this, and that's all you need to do. So that is about the personalization aspects. And finally, co-create your applications. A lot of us are into social networks these days. A lot of us use Wikipedia on a daily basis. The success of many of these applications in a content sense is that their material is co-created. Nobody owns that thing. Everybody adds to it, and everybody's prerogative and interest is kind of taken care of when that application is used. So for example, how many products, how many software engineers actually really think about asking the user, is this exactly what you need? It's not just feedback, it's also about proactively letting the person use the software and continuously evolving your piece of work in terms of the UI that the user feels that every feedback, every instruction that I gave is actually being taken care of in the iterations of the application. So this is pretty common in music once again, even though if you see rock concerts, the concert success is about the musician co-creating and co-working with the audience. So if you have seen the Rock On movie, there's a song which starts, that Mary Laundrie song, he actually has the audience sing along with him, clap along with him. So what really happens is you start relating and liking what is really happening in here, and that way you feel confident using, or rather experiencing what you see. So being able to co-create something, being able to keep the user's interest always on track really helps you to take your application to the next level and kind of make them successful. At this instance, I'm going to switch from my presentation and going to show you a very, very simple demo which is going to take me about 2 minutes. So before that, I'll just give you a brief context about an experience of my own life. So I travel a lot as part of my job, and I do a lot of air travel myself. So it's pretty interesting as to how you do an airline ticket booking in today's day. In the earlier days when I used to walk up to an airport and tell the young lady in the counter that I need a ticket to travel to Delhi, and say I'm traveling on the 13th of March, she just issues me a ticket, and the whole process is verbal, it's communicative, and takes just about 3 to 4 minutes. But for today, if you actually see at many of the websites, I wouldn't name anything specific. There are efficient ones, inefficient ones. But if you look at it, it asks you a lot of things, and it is a much longer process unless you are a computer geek, a guy who's working on a computer day in, day out. And of course, for people of an earlier generation who are not really computer savvy, they make typographic mistakes, they make, workflow mistakes that actually makes them very nervous to buy something online, because they all know you have to eventually pay, and any mistake is going to cost them dearly. So what we went and did with respect to this is to kind of create a small little demo application which will simplify the whole airline booking experience. Let me just try and show you that demo very quickly. All right, you have a small little application on my scene. So if you actually look at a simple ticket booking scenario, the questions that we ask to ourselves is that, what are the questions that a person in the ticket counter would ask you? So he or she would ask you, where are you going? When are you going? Who and how are you going? So these are the 4 pertinent questions that a person who's selling the ticket would ask you. So I just, we just went and extrapolated those questions into literal English and put it like that. So where are you going? When are you going? Who and how is going? So let us say for the where, I just select, and I don't know how clear it is on the projector. What you get, a world map on both sides. So let us say I am flying out from North America. I select and say from my headquarters at San Francisco, I will fly all the way to Europe. And I select and say, let's let's say I'm going to Amsterdam. So what that really involved is just 2 clicks of mouses and you have actually done the whole where are you going. So now as we move forward, we will see when are you going as the next step. So let's look at today. What we really see in the when are you going is typically a calendar which will tell you which month you are in. You keep switching back. And what really you need is just a timeline of the current month you are in. This demo is slightly old, but what you really need is a timeline of the date. So let's say I'm traveling from the 22nd, traveling between the 22nd and 26th. I need to just choose a range and be done with it. And similarly, choose a range below and be done with it. And one more pertinent problem that I see is about choosing time on the internet. So typically you have the select boxes which says, hours, 10 minutes and 10 seconds, and you actually do 3 clicks and 3 selects. But in real life, you don't do any of that. You actually just lift your hand, look at the watch and say it is 30 minutes past 11. So that is another aspect of humanization that I mentioned that I'm trying to bring in this application. So you get an analog clock and you just have to switch your time and you get 140 and you close this. Similarly, choose another time on this one and be done with it. Now the next step is to say who is going and how are you going. So can you see that it shows indicators with respect to who is traveling. So let me say 2 adults, 2 children, rather 1 child and 4 infants are traveling. Nevertheless, that is an indication of how you can very easily choose a travel mode without even typing a letter. If you have observed, in this whole application, I have not used the keyboard. I'm only using my mouse, and that's what it is. And finally, I just say I'm flying first class and I search. So what this application tries to demonstrate is the fact that you literally do what you actually speak out to people. You don't do anything different. So you build humanized interfaces which will actually let you build better experiences. And that also perfect times matches my end point of this presentation. And thank you very much. It's been an honor speaking here.